Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to take this time to introduce myself. My name is Mrs. Rosebounds, and I'm the principal of James W. Lilly Elementary School. And welcome, everybody, to Jane Doe's IEP meeting. At this time, I'd like everybody to go around the room and introduce themselves. We have here Mr. and Mrs. Jane Doe, and we have Jane Doe's special education teacher, Miss Collado, for her math resource. We have the speech pathologist here for Miss Jane Doe, and that is Mrs. M. We also have her general education teacher, Mrs. A, and we have the case manager here, Mrs. R. She's here to accompany Mr. and Mrs. Doe. And today we're not going to have Jane Doe because she's in the middle of a math test, and I understand Mr. and Mrs. Doe do not want to pull her from that test right now. So I would just like to confirm that everybody has received the IEP for Jane Doe prior to this meeting, and I'd like to ask her parents if they have any questions or concerns before we begin. No? Okay, great. So I would like to just have everybody sign in on the sign-in sheet where you see your name and date it, please. Great. Now that we have everybody's signature, we can proceed. Today, I'd like to start off by ensuring that everybody, her parents, have received the procedural safeguard statement. I know it's included in the IEP, and I just wanted to quickly review this so that you knew what it entails. So the safeguard statement is as the parent of a student who is or may be eligible for special education services, or as an adult student who is or may be eligible for special education services, you have the rights regarding identification, evaluation, classification, the development of an IEP, placement, and the provision of a free, appropriate public education under the New Jersey Administration Code of Special Education, NJAC 6A14. A description of these rights, which is called procedural safeguards, is contained in the document Parental Rights in Special Education, also known as PRIZE. The document is published by the New Jersey Department of Education, and a copy of PRIZE is provided to you upon referral for an initial evaluation when a disciplinary action that constitutes a change in placement is imposed by your school district and the first time a due process hearing or complaint investigation is requested. In addition to the copy, a copy will be provided to you at your request. So that is included in your IEP, in your daughter's IEP. So now I would like to continue on to discuss the agenda. So for today's agenda, we have the roles of each team member, which we had done already. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss the IEP, the goals, the strengths and weaknesses of Jane Doe. And also, at any time, I'd like you to know that if you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to ask one of us. We are going to take turns going around the table and discussing each of the weaknesses and strengths and some of the goals that were set for Jane Doe. After that, we're going to review the IEP. We're going to review the PLAF, and we're going to then go on to the factors for the review of her IEP. And within that, we're going to discuss the progress she's made, any other areas of need, the goals that each of us have set, any questions you have, you can ask at that time. When we're done with that, then we're going to go on to the least restrictive environment, accommodations and her modifications, her eligibility for extended school year, which is the ESY program, prior written notice, questions and any closing statements. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Collado, and this is her math resource teacher, so she's going to proceed with her portion of the IEP. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Leanne Collado. I'm Jane's math resource teacher. And at this time, I'd like to go over some of the findings for for Jane and what I've seen this year, her progress, some areas that I see that she needs some work in, and we're going to go over some of the goals and instructional strategies that we have for her. Okay, so on your copy of the IEP, if you go to page 3, you can follow along, and if you have any questions when I'm finished with this, you can feel free to ask. Okay, so according to Jane's assessment, her most recent STAR scores were dated from January, and they indicate a scaled score of 189. Percentile rank was K6, and her grade equivalency of K. Her first marking period grade was a 98%, and the second marking period was a 90. So, some of the strengths I've noticed with Jane is that she does love math. She loves being in class. She loves participating, although there are times where I have to try to encourage her more to participate, but she loves it. And I find that when I use positive reinforcement, it kind of pushes her to want to answer questions more. So some of the strengths are that she works well in small groups and with partners. She can add and subtract independently. She uses some mental math to solve problems, has good number sense, and she can compare and order numbers. And she's great. She's a great student that follows the rules and routines of the daily schedule, even during remote learning. She's on the computer at the right time and she's present. She stays on task during each lesson. Jane is also a well-behaved student who always follows the classroom rules and does understand math concepts and has good foundational computation skills. So some of the areas that I find that can be worked on is that she displays inappropriate work pace. She requires assistance to complete computation practice, difficulty with solving multi-step problem solving activities. She needs assistance sometimes to decode and understand word problems, but she reads well and she requires help to create math representations, and she can become a bit unfocused easily if confused or unable to solve a problem, and not asking for help when needed. Jane also needs a lot of direction and prompting when she becomes stuck or confused. She tends to just shut down and wait for one of the teachers to notice, that she needs some help. And when she gets stuck and confused on a problem, she tends to not speak up. So some of the instructional strategies that I have found that have worked, and I see that they can continue working for her, is appropriate peer partnering, establishing cooperative learning groups, verbal redirection and clarification. Um, she benefits from extra time. She doesn't mind the use of timers. She actually prefers them. Repeated practice. Uh, I've noticed that if I shorten the assignments for her, she's able to follow the same pace as the other students. Ongoing review of material, frequent checks for comprehension and completion of material, monitoring her comprehension of language understanding. The use of visual aids has helped her immensely, and frequent checking of independent work for completion and accuracy has been something that I found she benefits from as well. So, if at any time did you think of anything that you would like to interject or add at this moment, I can add that as well to her math portion of the IEP. Okay, some of the goals that we have, we're going to move forward to discuss the goals. As you had no questions or concerns. So for her math goals, Jane will use addition and subtraction within 100 to solve one and two step word problems involving situations of adding to and putting together with unknowns in all positions by using drawings and equations with a symbol for the unknown number to represent the problem. So, what I would say for her end of her marking period, when she's given one step addition and subtraction word problems within 100 involving situations of adding to and putting together. Um, I do believe that with moderate assistance, 80% of the time um, will be measured by weekly probes and assessments as measured by the anecdotal records or checklists, as measured by myself with the prepared tests, and measured by her classroom work samples, which, as you can see here, her last math the chapter test that we had taken before the break, she actually scored an 80 out of 100, and this was with eliminating two of the four responses. So I find that when I give her less choices to choose from, she definitely works better and doesn't tend to freeze up. I know that being communication impaired has been a little bit of a struggle for her because she won't ask for help. And even when asked if she needs help, um, sometimes she's just very quiet and reserved. But she did do great on this assessment, on this chapter test. And as you'll see here on some of her math assignments that we've done, um, she's actually doing fairly well. She does enjoy using the models. So I do believe that by the end of the third marking period, that she will, with minimal assistance, she'll be at 80%. And by the end of this IEP, when given one step addition and subtraction word problems within 100 involving situations of adding to and putting together with unknowns in all positions, she will use drawings and equations and with a symbol for the unknown number to represent and solve the problems independently 80% of the time. And I will continue to use her chapter tests and her work samples to monitor her success and be able to catch anything that I may need to modify along the way. Okay, and as far as her placement goes, as you know, she is in her gen ed room 80% of the time with her peers, the general education students, and she does get pull-out services for her math resource every day, and she's with me for about an hour or so. I help her with her math work that she comes in with, and she keeps up the same schedule as her peers. So if her peers in the gen ed room are working on page 149 in their math book, she's working on page 149 with me as well. And it's in a small group. So her classroom, when she comes in, has two students. So it's a pretty small group. She gets a lot of one-on-one attention from me. It's easy to share my time with two students. So she is tended to very well. She does go to lunch with the gen ed students. So the only time she's away from them is when she's receiving either speech or math. And I would also like to discuss the ESY. At this time, we do not feel that, and we also considered and discussed that ESY services were not required this year, and that was based on um, her report cards, teacher input, progress reports. There was no need for the ESY program for her. And as far as any modifications that she receives on her assessments, like I stated, she does get modified tests. So they're cut down, for her, and as far as um, how many answers, there are on the test and for each example. And she also does get extra time if she needs it. She's given the opportunity to take the test again if she scores, if she has a failing grade, we give her the opportunity to take it again. And other than that, I don't see any other reason why we should change her IEP or modify it. I know with um, the COVID restrictions, she is home remotely. You did sign a waiver just giving us permission to continue with her math resource and speech therapy online. And at this time, do you have any questions or concerns? No? Okay. And then I'd also like to finish with a prior written notice. So here's your copy. I know you received one last week before the meeting, but here's an updated one. And then I'd also like to have you sign the last page if you can. This is just the consent for IEP implementation. And that is giving us the green light to continue with the IEP the way it's been. We've been seeing such great progress with her, and she is opening up a bit more as the school year goes on. I know the whole COVID thing did put a little damper on it, but I think seeing her friends remotely has helped as well, and their familiar faces. So, okay, great. Thank you for your signature. And I'm going to make sure you get a copy of this before you leave. So, if anybody has any closing statements at this time or questions, no? Okay. Thank you so much. And that is the end of Jane Doe's IEP meeting.